The transport ship docked with Outpost Zenith just after dawn cycle. Kate Morgan gathered her gear and stepped onto the platform, taking her first look at her new assignment. The station was massive, a spinning wheel of metal and glass that housed over 3,000 personnel from 6 different species. It was one of the few places in the galaxy where humans worked side by side with aliens, protecting the outer territories from pirates and unknown threats. Kate adjusted the bag on her shoulder and made her way through the docking area. Other personnel moved past her, some human, most not. She saw the tall, graceful Vayari with their silver skin and 4 arms. She passed a group of Krenth warriors, their bodies covered in thick armor-like scales speaking in their harsh language. A pair of Sylth floated by, their tentacled forms moving through the air with an eerie smoothness. None of them paid her much attention at first. She was just another human, another newcomer to the station. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, barely 50 years since first contact. Most aliens saw them as inexperienced children playing at being soldiers, but then someone noticed her helmet. Kate carried it under her arm rather than wearing it. The helmet was regulation human military issue, but it looked like it had been through a war. Deep gouges ran across the surface, 4 parallel marks that looked like claw strikes. The metal was scarred with what appeared to be acid burns. Several puncture marks dotted the sides, and the faceplate had clearly been replaced, the new glass not quite matching the battered frame around it. A Krenth warrior stopped and stared at the helmet. He said something to his companion in their native language, and both of them laughed. Kate kept walking, her face neutral. She found her way to the command center and reported to Commander Dan Wright. He was a veteran human officer, one of the first to serve in mixed-species units. His office overlooked the station's central hub, where ships came and went like insects around a hive. "Lieutenant Morgan, welcome to Zenith," Dan said, shaking her hand. His eyes flicked to the helmet she set on his desk, but he said nothing about it. "I've read your file." "Well, the parts that aren't classified," Kate nodded. Most of her recent service record was sealed. Only her transfer orders were visible, and those just said she was being reassigned from frontier duty to station operations. "You'll be working with Captain Amy Chen's unit," Dan continued. "Mixed species patrol and response team. Amy's good. She's earned respect from all the species here, which isn't easy. Follow her lead and you'll do fine." A door opened and 3 figures entered. One was human, a woman with short dark hair and the confident posture of someone who had commanded for years. That would be Amy Chen. Behind her came 2 aliens. The first was Vayari, her silver skin gleaming under the office lights, her forearms moving with elegant precision. The second was Krenth, a massive warrior whose scaled body barely fit through the doorframe. "Commander," Amy said with a nod. Her eyes found Kate and she smiled. "You must be Morgan. I'm Amy Chen. Lieutenant Kate Morgan, ma'am," Kate replied. "This is Saris, our Vayari liaison officer." Amy gestured to the silver-skinned alien. "And Thexnal, Krenth military advisor." Saris inclined her head gracefully. Thexnal's eyes found Kate's helmet on the desk, and something like amusement crossed his reptilian features. "Your equipment has seen better days, human," Thexnal said in heavily accented English. "Do your people not maintain their gear properly?" Kate met his gaze but said nothing. Saris spoke, her voice musical and soft. "In Vayari culture, we believe one's equipment reflects one's inner state. Such damage suggests chaos and disorder." "We have a training exercise scheduled for tomorrow," Amy cut in, her tone diplomatic but firm. "Mixed species teams running combat simulations. It'll be a good chance for Lieutenant Morgan to integrate with the unit." The briefing continued for another hour. They discussed patrol schedules, threat assessments, and station protocols. Throughout it all, Kate noticed the glances at her helmet, the barely concealed smirks from Thexanol, the way Saris's eyes kept drifting to the scarred metal with what looked like concern or pity. When the briefing ended, Amy walked Kate to her assigned quarters. The corridor was busy with personnel changing shifts. More stares followed the battered helmet. "Don't let them get to you," Amy said quietly. "They don't understand humans yet. Most aliens come from worlds with clear hierarchies and ancient warrior traditions. They see damaged gear as a sign of defeat or carelessness, I noticed," Kate said. "The Krenth especially. In their culture, warriors either die in battle or win without taking damage. Their reflexes are faster than ours. Their doctrine is aggressive and direct. They think caution is cowardice. To them, your helmet says you're slow and incompetent. They reached Kate's quarters, a small room with a bunk, a locker, and a desk. Standard military issue, identical to thousands of others on the station. Why don't you replace it? Amy asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. You could requisition a new one. No one would blame you. Kate set the helmet on the desk, running her finger along one of the deep gouges. I have my reasons, Amy nodded slowly. Fair enough. Get settled in. Training exercise starts at 0800 tomorrow. It's in the combat simulation facility. Deck 7. Don't be late. The aliens are already skeptical of human capabilities. We need to show them what we can do. After Amy left, Kate unpacked her gear. She didn't have much. Soldiers learned to travel light. Clothes, personal items, weapons, and armor. She placed each item carefully in her locker. The movement's automatic after years of military service. Last, she picked up the helmet again. In the quiet of her quarters, she studied the damage more closely. The 4 parallel gouges that ran from crown to jaw. The acid burns that had eaten through the outer coating. The puncture marks that had nearly penetrated to the interior padding. She remembered the weight of the creature that had made these marks. Remembered the sound of its claws scraping across the metal, inches from her skull. Remembered the smell of the acid, the heat of its breath, the intelligence in its eyes. Kate placed the helmet on the shelf above her bunk where she could see it. Some people kept photos of family or loved ones. She kept this. A reminder of the worst night of her life and the fact that she had survived it. Tomorrow she would face the training exercise. She would work with aliens who thought humans were weak and inexperienced. They would see her scarred helmet and think she was incompetent, that she had been lucky to survive whatever had damaged it. Let them think that. Kate had learned that underestimation was a weapon as sharp as any blade. The creatures on Vector Prime had underestimated humanity. That mistake had cost them everything. She lay back on her bunk and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come soon enough. And when the aliens asked about her helmet, as she knew they eventually would, she would tell them the truth. It wasn't her helmet. It belonged to the thing that had tried to kill her. And that thing was dead. The combat simulation facility took up an entire deck of Outpost Zenith. Kate arrived early, as was her habit. The massive room was empty except for technicians running system checks. Holographic projectors lined the walls and ceiling, capable of creating realistic terrain and enemies for training purposes. She made her way to the equipment room and began checking her gear. Weapons, ammunition, communications equipment, everything had to be perfect. She had learned that lesson the hard way. You are the new human, a deep voice said behind her. Kate turned to find a Krenth warrior standing in the doorway. He was massive, easily 7 feet tall. His body covered in the natural scaled armor that his species was famous for. His eyes were yellow and sharp, studying her with the gaze of a predator. Lieutenant Kate Morgan, she said. I am Vaktar. We are assigned to the same team for this exercise. He stepped closer, his eyes falling on her helmet. That is the damaged equipment I heard about. Kate said nothing, continuing to check her weapon. In Krenth culture, we believe a warrior's equipment tells their story, Vaktar continued. Pristine armor means victory. Damaged armor means defeat or incompetence. Which are you, human? Defeated or incompetent? Neither, Kate said quietly. Vaktar laughed, a harsh sound. Then you are careless. Only a careless warrior allows their gear to be damaged so severely and continues to use it. Do your people have no pride? Before Kate could respond, 2 more figures entered. One was a young human man, barely out of training by the look of him. The other was a sylph, its tentacled body floating a few feet off the ground, its large eyes reflecting no emotion. I'm Ben Carter, the young man said with a nervous smile. Pilot and support. This is Resh, our tactical officer. The sylph drifted closer to Kate, its tentacles moving in patterns that Kate had learned meant it was processing information. The sylph were known for their analytical minds, capable of running complex calculations in seconds. Your helmet has sustained significant damage, Resh said in its flat, emotionless voice. Statistical analysis suggests poor situational awareness and slow reaction times. The probability that you will be a liability to this team is 73%. Kate met the alien's large eyes. Your statistics don't know everything. Statistics are reality expressed in numbers, Resh replied. Numbers do not lie. Ben shifted uncomfortably, clearly embarrassed by his teammates' equipment. Kate saw him glance at her helmet and then quickly look away. The team briefing was short. They were assigned a search and rescue mission in a simulated environment. A ship had crashed on a hostile world, and they needed to secure the site and extract any survivors. The simulation was based on a real planet called Vector Prime, a jungle world in the Outer Territories. Kate's attention sharpened at the name. Vector Prime, of course it would be that world. Standard extraction, Vokhtar said dismissively. Simple mission. We will complete it quickly. The simulation began. The room around them transformed, holographic projectors creating a dense jungle environment. Massive trees rose on all sides, their canopy blocking most of the light. The air felt humid and hot, the simulation system adjusting temperature and moisture to match the real world. Kate took point without asking, moving into the jungle with her weapon ready. She swept every angle, checked every shadow, moved with careful deliberation. You move like a frightened child, Vokhtar said behind her. Krenth doctrine teaches aggressive advancement. We dominate the terrain, we do not fear it. Kate ignored him, continuing her careful progress. She had been to Vector Prime. She knew what lived in jungles like this. The simulation was sanitized, made safe for training, but the real world was anything but safe. They moved through the dense vegetation for 20 minutes. Ben followed Kate's lead, his weapon ready but his movements uncertain. Resh floated above the undergrowth, scanning with sensors. Vokhtar walked heavily behind them, making no effort to move quietly. Contact, Resh announced suddenly. A simulated predator burst from the undergrowth, moving fast toward their flank. It was large, reptilian, with powerful jaws. A standard jungle predator, nothing special, but Kate had been watching that exact spot. She had seen the vegetation move wrong, had noticed the shadow that was too dark. Her weapon was already aimed when the creature appeared. She fired 3 shots, each one hitting center mass. The simulated creature fell, its holographic form dissolving. Vokhtar stared at her. Lucky, he said after a moment. They continued. Kate kept taking point, kept moving carefully, kept scanning every shadow. Twice more simulated predators attacked from ambush positions. Twice more Kate was ready, positioned to counter the threat before it could strike. The crashed ship appeared ahead, its hull broken open, cargo scattered around it. Standard extraction protocol said they should sweep the perimeter quickly and move to the ship. That was what Vokhtar wanted to do. Wait, Kate said, holding up her hand. We do not have time for your caution, Vokhtar growled. The mission parameters require speed. Something's wrong, Kate said, studying the crash site. The cargo was scattered in a specific pattern. The damage to the hull looked staged, and the jungle around the site was too quiet. Your paranoia is noted and dismissed, Vokhtar said, pushing past her. I will show you how Krenth complete missions. He strode into the clearing, his weapon ready but his guard down. Ben followed hesitantly. Resh floated after them, sensors active. Kate stayed at the tree line watching. Her instincts were screaming that something was wrong. She had felt this before, on the real Vector Prime, right before everything went wrong. The attack came from 3 sides at once. Simulated predators, larger and faster than the ones they had encountered before, burst from concealed positions. They had been waiting, using the crash site as bait. Vokhtar spun, firing, but one of the creatures was already on him. In the simulation, it would have torn his throat out. The system registered him as a casualty, and his weapon powered down. Ben managed to get 2 shots off before a predator hit him from behind. Another casualty. Resh's sensors had been fooled by the creature's heat masking. A third casualty. Kate, still at the tree line, had perfect positioning. She had known the attack was coming, had positioned herself to respond. Her shots were precise and controlled. The simulated predators fell one by one, their holographic forms dissolving. The simulation ended. The jungle disappeared, replaced by the stark walls of the training facility. Results appeared on screens around the room. Team survival rate, 25%, a mechanical voice announced. Mission parameters failed. Individual performance ratings. Vokhtar eliminated in first contact. Ben Carter eliminated in first contact. Resh eliminated in first contact. Kate Morgan, only surviving team member, mission completion via alternate parameters. Vokhtar's face was dark with anger. The simulation was flawed. No predator could have hidden from our sensors. The simulation was accurate, a new voice said. Amy Chen walked into the room, a data pad in her hand. Vector Prime predators are capable of heat masking and ambush tactics. Lieutenant Morgan recognized the signs and positioned accordingly. The rest of you walked into an obvious trap. She was simply overly cautious, Resh said. Slow advancement. Excessive scanning. Paranoid behavior. Amy looked at Kate and something passed between them. An understanding. Debriefing in conference room 3, Amy said. Move out. As they walked to the debriefing, Vaktar fell in beside Kate. You were lucky today, human. Fear made you slow, and that slowness happened to save you this time. But fear is not a tactic. It is a weakness. Kate said nothing. She had learned that some lessons could not be taught, only experienced. These aliens had trained their whole lives in warrior cultures, learning doctrines passed down through centuries. They believed in aggression, in honor, in facing danger directly. But Kate had learned a different lesson. She had learned it in a jungle on Vector Prime, watching creatures smarter than any simulation tear through soldiers who believed their doctrine would protect them. She had learned that survival wasn't about honor or aggression. It was about being the one still alive when the dust settled. And if that meant being called paranoid or scared or lucky, so be it. Dead warriors didn't get to argue about terminology. The debriefing was tense. Other teams had completed the simulation with varying success. Most had lost at least one team member. A few had achieved full survival, but those teams were composed of veterans who had worked together for years. Kate's team had the distinction of having only one survivor. In the eyes of the aliens present, that made her a failure. She had not saved her team. The fact that she had survived meant nothing if her teammates died, but Amy's evaluation was different. She praised Kate's situational awareness, her positioning, her recognition of the ambush. She pointed out that the other team members had ignored Kate's warning and paid the price. Still, as the debriefing ended and personnel filed out, Kate heard the whispers. Saw the looks. The alien still thought her helmet was a sign of incompetence. Still thought her caution was cowardice, let them think it. Kate returned to her quarters and sat on her bunk, her scarred helmet in her hands. Soon enough, someone would ask directly about the damage, and when they did, she would tell them the truth. Not because she wanted their respect or understanding, but because some truths needed to be told. 3 days after the training exercise, Kate found herself in the station's common area. It was evening cycle when most personnel gathered to relax after duty shifts. The large room had sections for different species, areas designed to accommodate various environmental needs, but the center space was neutral ground where everyone could mingle. Kate sat alone at a corner table, reading reports on her data pad. She preferred solitude, always had, but especially after Vector Prime. Crowds made her tense. Too many angles to watch, too many positions to track. Mind if we join you? Amy Chen stood beside her table, along with 2 other human officers Kate recognized from various briefings. Lieutenant Jake Peters from engineering and Dr. Laura Grant from the medical bay. Free station, Kate said, gesturing to the empty chairs. They sat and conversation started easily. Amy talked about the upcoming supply run. Jake complained about a faulty ventilation system on Deck 9. Laura discussed the challenges of treating Sylph patients. Normal talk, the kind that helped soldiers unwind. Other personnel began to drift toward the area. A group of Vayari settled at a nearby table, their musical voices carrying in the air. Several Krenth warriors arrived, talking loudly about a recent patrol mission. Even a few Sylph floated in, though they rarely participated in social gatherings. One of the Krenth warriors, a veteran named Korth, began telling a story. His voice boomed through the common area, drawing attention. He spoke of a battle against pirates, how he had boarded their ship alone and cleared 3 decks of enemies without taking a single hit. His armor had remained perfect, unblemished, a sign of superior skill and warrior prowess. Other aliens joined in with their own stories. A Vayari told of negotiating peace between 2 warring factions, her diplomatic skill preventing bloodshed. A Sylph described calculating the precise trajectory to disable an enemy ship's engines without destroying the vessel. Kate listened quietly, sipping her water. These were good stories, the kind warriors told to build camaraderie and establish respect. Each story reinforced the values of their respective cultures. Krenth aggression and honor, Vayari wisdom and grace, Sylph logic and precision. Then Vaktar arrived. He was with several other Krenth warriors, all in high spirits from some earlier victory in the training sims. He saw Kate and his expression shifted to something between amusement and disdain. The paranoid human, he said loudly enough for many to hear. Still wearing that damaged helmet, I assume? Kate set down her water but didn't respond. Vaktar approached her table, his companions following. I have been thinking about your equipment. In Krenth culture, we have a saying. A warrior's armor reflects their soul. Pristine armor, pristine spirit. Damaged armor, damaged spirit. He leaned closer. What does your helmet say about your spirit, human? The common area had grown quieter. Other conversations died down as personnel sensed confrontation. Amy tensed beside Kate, ready to intervene, but Kate put a hand on her arm. It's fine, she said quietly. Tell us a story, Korth said, joining Vaktar. You have heard ours. Share with us how your helmet became so damaged. Was it a glorious battle? Or simply carelessness during training? Kate looked around the room. Dozens of eyes were on her now. Humans and aliens alike, all waiting to see how she would respond. She could deflect, could walk away, could refuse to answer. That would be easier. But she was tired of the looks, the whispers, the mockery. And maybe, just maybe, these warriors needed to understand something about humans that their ancient cultures and proud traditions had not taught them. All right, Kate said, her voice calm and steady. I'll tell you about my helmet. She stood and walked to the center of the room where everyone could see and hear. The scarred helmet sat on her table and she picked it up, holding it so the light caught the deep gouges and acid burns. First, you need to understand something, Kate said. This isn't my helmet. It belonged to the thing that tried to kill me. Silence fell over the common area. Even Vaktar's smug expression faltered slightly. Kate turned the helmet slowly, letting everyone see the damage. 9 months ago, I was part of a scientific expedition to Vector Prime. That's the world the training simulation was based on, though the simulation is nothing like the real place. My squad was assigned to protect a research team studying the planet for colonization potential. She set the helmet on a central table where everyone could see it. The initial surveys said Vector Prime was a standard jungle world. Dangerous predators, but nothing modern weapons couldn't handle. The planet had been surveyed before by a Krenth exploration team, and they rated it as a manageable threat level. Korth nodded. I remember that expedition. 12 warriors, all experienced. They reported the world was suitable for resource extraction. They reported wrong, Kate said quietly. Or rather, they missed something critical. On our 3rd day on the planet, we found them. What was left of them? The room grew even quieter. Several Krenth warriors leaned forward, their attention fully focused now. 12 Krenth warriors, some of the finest soldiers in known space, torn apart. Kate continued. Their weapons were there, still charged, still functional. Their armor was breached in dozens of places. The camp was destroyed, but there were no signs of a fight. It was like something had swept through and killed them all in minutes. Vaktar's expression had changed from mockery to something else. Concern, maybe, or disbelief. Commander Lisa Brooks wanted to evacuate immediately, Kate said. But before we could reach our shuttle, night fell on Vector Prime. That's when we learned why the Krenth team had died. The surveys had missed something crucial. A species that the xenobiology team would later classify as apex predators. We started calling them shredders. Kate picked up her helmet again, running her fingers along the claw marks. The shredders were unlike anything in the database. They stood about 8 feet tall with 6 limbs. 4 of those limbs ended in blades made of something harder than most armor alloys. Their skin secreted an acid compound that helped them digest prey. But the worst part wasn't their physical capabilities. She looked directly at Vaktar. The worst part was their intelligence. They were smart. Pack hunters with sophisticated tactics. They would study their prey for days, learning patterns, testing defenses, finding weaknesses. The Krenth team had been watched for 3 days before the shredders attacked. By the time your warriors realized they were being hunted, it was too late. Korth stood abruptly. That is impossible. Krenth warriors are trained from birth. Our reflexes are superior to most species. Our tactics are proven over centuries. 12 warriors would not fall to simple predators. They weren't simple, Kate said softly. And they didn't just kill your warriors. They learned from them. Every tactic the Krenth used, every defensive position, every attack pattern the shredders studied and adapted to. She paused, letting that sink in. My team had 6 soldiers and 4 scientists. We fortified inside the research outpost, a prefabricated structure designed to withstand severe weather and standard predator attacks. We had supplies, ammunition, and communication equipment. We thought we could hold out until rescue arrived. Kate's voice remained steady, but something in her eyes had changed, a distance as if she was seeing something far away. The shredders began their assault 1 hour after full dark. They tested every defense we had. Every window, every door, every ventilation shaft. When they found a weak point, they probed it. When we reinforced that point, they moved to another. She held up the helmet again. The power failed 2 hours into the attack. Emergency lights showed us dozens of them, circling the perimeter, moving in patterns that looked almost military. They were coordinating, communicating, executing a siege with the precision of a trained army. Laura, the doctor at Kate's original table, spoke up. "How many were there?" "We counted at least 40, Kate said. "But there could have been more in the darkness." They took turns attacking, keeping us under constant pressure. We couldn't rest. Couldn't treat wounds properly, couldn't think. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the aliens who had mocked her. Lieutenant Jack Morrison died in the first breach. They pulled him through a ventilation shaft we thought was too small for them to use. Turns out they could collapse their body structure, compress themselves to fit through narrow spaces. We sealed the vents after that, but then they started working on the doors. Kate's fingers traced the acid burns on the helmet. Dr. Nina Cross went next. She tried to reach the communication equipment to send a distress signal. A shredder broke through the window and grabbed her. We got it off her, killed it, but she was hurt too badly. She died 20 minutes later. The common area was completely silent now. Every being present was listening intently, the earlier mockery forgotten. One by one my team fell, Kate continued. Sergeant Kyle Davis, Corporal Emma White, Private Jason Lee, Dr. Henry Martinez. Each death taught the shredders something new about us. They learned which weapons hurt them most and started using the bodies of their dead as shields. They learned our firing patterns and started dodging. They learned our command structure and began targeting specific people. She set the helmet down again, both hands resting on it. By dawn, I was alone. The outpost was compromised in 6 places. I was down to my last magazine of ammunition. I had wounds that should... The next evening, Kate found herself back in the common area, though she hadn't planned on it. Amy had asked her to join for dinner, and Kate found it hard to refuse her commanding officer, especially one who had been nothing but supportive since her arrival. The room was more crowded than usual. Word had spread about Kate's partial story from the night before, and many personnel had made excuses to be present, hoping to hear more. Kate noticed immediately. She saw the way conversations paused when she entered, the way eyes followed her to her table. She sat with Amy and a few other human officers, trying to ignore the attention. But it was impossible to miss the group of Krenth warriors at a nearby table, including Vokhtar and Korth, or the Vayari delegation that had positioned themselves within hearing distance. Even several Sylth had arrived, their tentacled forms hovering at the edges of the room. Kate was halfway through her meal when Korth approached. The older Krenth warrior moved with more respect than Vokhtar had shown, his posture suggesting a formal request, rather than confrontation. "Lieutenant Morgan," he said, his voice careful, "last night you began a story about 12 Krenth warriors who fell on Vector Prime. As one who trained some of those warriors, I would hear the rest of your tale, not to mock but to understand." Kate set down her fork and looked around the room. Everyone was watching now, waiting. She could refuse, but what would be the point? They needed to hear this, not for her sake, but for theirs. "All right," she said quietly. "I'll tell you what happened that night." She stood and moved to the center of the room again. The scarred helmet was in her quarters, but she didn't need it now. The memories were clear enough. "I told you about the shredders," Kate began. "How they were intelligent, how they learned from every encounter, how they had killed 12 Krenth warriors. When they attacked our outpost, we thought we could hold them off. We were wrong." She closed her eyes briefly, remembering. The battle lasted 11 hours. We had defensive positions, overlapping fields of fire, emergency protocols, standard military doctrine. But the shredders didn't follow standard patterns. They adapted. Kate opened her eyes and looked at Korth. Jack Morrison was our heavy weapons specialist. Strong, experienced, good in a fight. The shredders studied him for 30 minutes, watched how he moved, where he positioned himself. Then they came through a ventilation shaft directly behind him. They had collapsed their bodies to fit through a space we thought was secure. Jack got off 2 shots before they pulled him into the shaft. We heard him screaming for almost a minute before it stopped. The room was silent. Even the environmental system seemed to have quieted. "We sealed the vents with emergency foam," Kate continued. "It took us 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, the shredders changed tactics. They started testing the windows. Not breaking them, just tapping, scratching, studying the material, Dr. Nina Cross was trying to boost our communication signal to call for help. A shredder put its claw through the window so fast we barely saw it move. It grabbed Nina and started pulling her through glass that was supposed to be unbreakable. Kate's voice remained steady, but her hands were clenched at her sides. We got her free, killed the shredder, but Nina's injuries were severe. The acid from the creature's skin had burned through her suit. Dr. Henry Martinez tried to treat her, but we didn't have the right supplies. She died asking if we had sent the distress signal. We hadn't. The shredders had damaged the antenna. She paused, took a breath. That's when we realized these weren't just smart animals. They were tactical. They had prioritized targets. The antenna wasn't random damage. They had deliberately prevented us from calling for help. Saris, the Veari diplomat, spoke up. Surely you had backup communication systems. We did, Kate said. But they required line of sight to our ship, which was 3 miles away. Someone would have to go outside into the darkness surrounded by shredders. Commander Lisa Brooks decided to wait for dawn. It was a logical decision. Dawn was only 8 hours away. We thought we could last 8 hours. Kate shook her head slowly. Kyle Davis died next. He was watching the east door when they broke through the wall instead. Not the door, the wall. They had been digging underneath the outpost, coming up through the floor. Kyle fought hard, took 3 of them with him, but there were more. Always more. She continued, her voice growing quieter but somehow more intense. We fell back to the central room, set up a final defensive position. 6 of us left. We had maybe 200 rounds of ammunition total. The shredders knew it too. They could count, could calculate. So they changed tactics again. Kate's eyes grew distant. They stopped the direct assaults and started psychological warfare. They would scratch at the walls, keeping us awake, keeping us tense. They would make sounds that mimicked human voices, calling for help in the darkness. When we didn't respond, they started using the actual voices of our dead, recording somehow, or mimicry, I don't know. But we heard Jack's voice calling from outside, asking why we had left him. Several people in the room shifted uncomfortably. Even the Krenth warriors looked disturbed. Emma White broke first, Kate said. She heard her sister's voice, even though her sister was safely on Earth, light years away. Emma knew it was a trick, but the shredders had studied her, learned which sounds would hurt most. She opened the door before anyone could stop her. They took her in seconds. Kate's jaw tightened. Jason Lee went trying to save her. Then Dr. Martinez when he tried to retrieve medical supplies from a sealed section. By dawn it was just me and Commander Lisa. 2 soldiers. 40 rounds of ammunition between us, surrounded by creatures that had learned everything about how we fought, how we thought, how we broke. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of the beings who had mocked her damaged helmet. Commander Brooks gave me half the ammunition and told me to make a run for the ship. She would hold the outpost, draw their attention, give me a chance. It was a good plan, a logical plan. The mission was to protect the research data, and someone needed to survive to deliver it. Kate's voice dropped even lower. I refused. The shredders had been learning from us all night, but I had been learning from them too. I had watched them adapt, seen their patterns. They were intelligent, yes, but intelligence creates predictability. They tested defenses systematically. They prioritized targets based on threat assessment. They could be manipulated if you understood their decision-making process. Resh, the Sylth tactical officer, floated closer. How does one manipulate a superior predator? By making them curious instead of aggressive, Kate said. The shredders had killed everyone who fought them directly. Everyone who ran. Everyone who hid. But what about someone who did something unexpected? Something that didn't fit their learned patterns? She smiled, and it was a cold expression. Commander Brooks and I set a trap. We used the last of our explosives to rig the outpost, then we walked outside together. Just walked out the front door into a clearing, surrounded by shredders carrying no weapons. We wanted them confused, curious about why prey would surrender. The room was so quiet that Kate could hear the breathing of the beings around her. It worked. They didn't attack immediately. They circled us, studying, trying to understand this new behavior. That's when we split up. Lisa ran north toward the ship. I ran south toward the jungle. The pack split to follow us, and that's when Lisa detonated the charges remotely. Kate's expression was grim. The explosion killed at least 15 shredders. Maybe more. It also collapsed part of the outpost onto others, but Lisa was too close to the blast radius. She sacrificed herself to thin their numbers to give me a chance. She was quiet for a moment, remembering. I ran into the jungle with maybe half the pack following me. 20 shredders, maybe more, all focused on the human who had outsmarted them. I had no weapons except a combat knife. I was wounded, exhausted, and being hunted by creatures that had killed 12 Krenth warriors. Vaktar leaned forward. How did you survive? I stopped running, Kate said simply. That's what they expected me to do, so I did the opposite. I found a defensive position, a rock formation with limited approaches, and I waited. I let them come to me, she continued. The shredders were confused again. Prey ran, prey hid, prey fought desperately. But I did none of those things. I just waited calm and ready with nothing but a knife. It made them cautious. Kate's voice grew intense. They sent smaller ones first, testing me. I killed 2 before the rest backed off. Then they tried coordinated attacks from multiple angles. I held my position, made them come at me through narrow approaches where their numbers didn't matter. Killed 3 more. She looked at Korth. Your warriors probably fought with honor, with courage, with all their training and skill. And they died because the shredders learned to counter honor and courage and skill. But I didn't fight with honor. I fought dirty. I used every trick, every deception, every underhanded tactic I could think of. Kate's hands moved as she spoke, illustrating. I used dead shredder bodies as shields. I threw rocks to distract them, then attacked from different angles. I pretended to be more wounded than I was, drawing them in close. I screamed in pain when I wasn't hurt and stayed silent when I was. I made them think I was dying, then killed them when they approached to finish me off. The morning after Kate finished her story, she woke to find her status on Outpost Zenith had changed completely. Personnel who had avoided her now nodded respectfully in the corridors. Aliens who had mocked her helmet now studied her with careful attention. Even the Sylph, who rarely showed emotion, seemed to regard her differently. Kate found it uncomfortable. She had not told her story to gain respect or admiration. She had told it because the aliens needed to understand something about humanity, about survival, about the difference between doctrine and reality. But attention was attention, wanted or not. Commander Dan Wright called her to his office that morning. When she arrived, she found Amy Chen already there, along with Korth and Saris. The Vayari diplomat looked different today. Her forearms moving in patterns that Kate had learned indicated deep thought. Lieutenant Morgan, Dan said, gesturing to a chair, we've been discussing your experience on Vector Prime. The official reports were classified, but now that the story is public, we need to address some implications. Kate sat, wary. Classified information going public could mean reprimands or worse. Dan must have seen her concern. You're not in trouble. In fact, quite the opposite. The alien species representatives have made a formal request. They want you to develop a new training program based on your experiences. Saris spoke, her voice as musical as always, but with a new undertone of respect. The Vayari have existed for 10,000 years. We have refined our cultures, our tactics, our ways of war, but in all that time, we have focused on perfection within our established systems. What you did on Vector Prime was a abandoned system entirely. It is a perspective we lack. Korth nodded, his scaled face serious. The Krenth pride themselves on warrior traditions passed down through centuries. But traditions can become rigid. You showed that survival sometimes requires discarding tradition, adapting to circumstances no doctrine prepared you for. This is a valuable lesson. We want you to teach, Amy said with a slight smile, mixed species teams. Show them what you learned on Vector Prime. Not just tactics, but mindset. How to think like prey that becomes predator. Kate considered this. Teaching meant reliving Vector Prime repeatedly, sharing memories she had tried to bury. But it also meant potentially saving lives, preparing soldiers for threats their cultures had not imagined. I'll do it, she said finally, but I teach it my way. No glory, no honor, no tradition, just survival, Dan smiled. That's exactly what we want. The training program began a week later. Kate's first class included personnel from all species. Humans, Krenth, Vayari, Sylph, and others. 20 students in total, all volunteers, all curious about what the scarred helmet human could teach them. Kate started by showing them her helmet. The deep gouges, the acid burns, the puncture marks. This is not a trophy, she told them. This is a reminder. The thing that made these marks was smarter than any of us, faster than the Krenth, more patient than the Sylph. It killed 12 trained warriors in minutes. It killed 5 of my squad in hours. But it made one mistake. She set the helmet on a table where they could all see it. It got curious. It wanted to understand its prey before it killed. That curiosity created a weakness. My job is to teach you how to create and exploit weaknesses in enemies that should be unbeatable. The training was unlike anything the station had seen before. Kate threw out standard doctrine. She made Krenth warriors practice retreating and hiding, concepts alien to their aggressive culture. She forced Vayari diplomats to think like predators instead of negotiators. She taught Sylth tacticians to embrace chaos and unpredictability instead of pure logic. Some students struggled with the concepts. A Krenth warrior named Torvik quit after the first week, unable to accept training that contradicted everything his culture taught. But most stayed, including Vokhtar. The young Krenth who had mocked Kate most openly became one of her most dedicated students. You were right, Vokhtar told her after a particularly grueling exercise. About the training simulation, about Vector Prime, about everything. I have been taught that aggression and honor are paramount. But watching you fight in the simulation, seeing how you think, I understand now. Honor is for victories. Survival is for when victory is impossible. Kate nodded. Honor gets you killed when facing something that doesn't understand honor. The Shredders didn't care about Krenth warrior traditions. They just cared about hunting efficiently. You survived today because you stopped fighting like a Krenth and started fighting like prey that refuses to die. The weeks passed, and Kate's reputation continued to grow. Stories about her training methods spread throughout the station. Personnel who had not been in the common area that night heard about the Vector Prime incident secondhand. Details got exaggerated in some versions, simplified in others, but the core message remained. The human with the scarred helmet had survived something that killed superior warriors by abandoning doctrine and embracing adaptation. Other human officers on the station noticed the change in how aliens treated humanity as a whole. Before, humans were seen as newcomers, inexperienced and weak. Now there was wariness, respect, even a little fear. The aliens began to understand that humanity's relative youth in space was not a weakness, but potentially an advantage. Humans had not yet developed rigid traditions or unshakable doctrines. They were still flexible, still willing to try new approaches, still capable of radical adaptation. One evening, 3 months after Kate's story had become public, she found herself back in the common area. This time, several alien officers approached and asked to join her table. Among them was Vokhtar, Saris, and a Sylth named Kresh who had been in Kate's training program. We have been discussing human tactics, Saris said, her 4 arms gesturing gracefully. Your species is only 2 generations into space travel, yet you have already adapted to threats that challenge species with millennia of experience. We wish to understand why. Kate considered the question while sipping her water. Maybe it's because we're still scared, she said finally. Your species have been in space so long that you've forgotten how dangerous it is. You have protocols and procedures for everything. You've made the galaxy predictable. She set down her cup. But humans remember that Earth was a dangerous place. We evolved alongside predators that hunted us, in environments that killed the unprepared. We didn't have scales like the Krenth or multiple arms like the Vayari. We weren't the biggest or the fastest or the strongest. So we learned to be the most adaptable. We learned to use tools, to change tactics, to run when necessary and fight when possible. Kresh's tentacles moved in patterns of understanding. Your species treats every threat as novel, requiring new solutions. Other species rely on proven methods. Exactly, Kate said. And that works great until you face something new. Something your proven methods weren't designed for. Then you're stuck with doctrine that doesn't apply, and you die following procedures that made sense for different threats. Vokhtar leaned forward. This is why you removed your helmet in front of the Alpha Shredder. No Krenth would do such a thing. It violates every principle of combat. But it was effective because it was unexpected. Kate nodded. The Alpha had learned to counter everything we tried. Every attack, every defense, every tactic. But it had never seen prey voluntarily disarm itself. That behavior didn't fit any pattern it understood. So it got curious, and curiosity killed it. The conversation continued late into the night. Other personnel joined, asking questions about human tactics, about Earth's history, about how humanity had survived on what they now understood was a relatively dangerous world. Kate answered what she could, though she was no historian or anthropologist. She only knew her own experiences, her own lessons learned in blood and fear. As the weeks turned to months, Kate's training program expanded. More species requested access. Outpost Zenith Command authorized additional classes. Kate trained patrol teams, response units, and even command staff. She showed them simulations based on Vector Prime, but also on other scenarios where standard doctrine failed. The scarred helmet remained on display in her quarters, but now it was occasionally borrowed for training purposes. New recruits were shown the damage, told the abbreviated story, and asked to imagine facing something that created those marks. The helmet became a teaching tool, a physical reminder of what waited in the unexplored regions of space. 6 months after Kate's arrival at the station, the Krenth military formally requested that she visit their homeworld to address their warrior academies. The Vayari Diplomatic Corps asked her to consult on first contact protocols. The Sylth Defense Network wanted her tactical analyses of unconventional threats. Kate declined all of them. She was a soldier, not a celebrity or a diplomat. Her place was on the station, training personnel who actually needed the skills, not entertaining politicians or inspiring academy students. But she did agree to one request. A joint human-alien task force was being assembled to explore and potentially quarantine worlds with extreme threat species. The shredders on Vector Prime were not unique. Survey data suggested dozens of worlds harbored similar apex predators, intelligent and deadly. Someone needed to assess these worlds, establish proper protocols, and prevent more deaths. Kate accepted the assignment. It meant leaving Outpost Zenith,